What is the creepiest missing person case you know about? On February 14th, 2000, Asha Degree, a young girl, vanished during the night. It was not only Valentine's Day, but also her parents' wedding anniversary. Despite living in a sheltered environment with no internet or cell phone and with friends only from church or school, Asha mysteriously disappeared. On the night of February 14, Asha left her home in the middle of a storm carrying a backpack. Now, this was unusual because she was afraid of storms and dogs, and she was typically obedient and rule abiding. Her father checked on her at 2:30 a.m. and she was in bed. However, at 3:15 a.m., drivers reported seeing a girl matching Asha's description walking along Highway 18 in the rain. When one driver tried to help, the girl ran into the woods and it was the last time Asha was seen. Later, items belonging to Asha were found in a shed in the woods, and her backpack was discovered buried a year later. There have been no further clues about her disappearance. One theory suggests that Asha was lured out of her home by someone she knew and trusted, possibly under the pretense of a surprise party for her parents' anniversary. Now, this person would have to be familiar with her family and not seem out of place when talking to her. Another theory revolves around a book she read in school, The Whipping Boy, which features characters running away on an adventure. However, this doesn't explain why Asha would choose such a frightening night to leave or why she would break so many rules. The case of Asha Degree is perplexing because it seems like a situation that should never have occurred. The facts are strange and the known details don't seem to fit together. The police have ruled out her parents, but could they know more? Without internet access, it's a mystery who could have manipulated a shy, obedient girl to overcome her deep fears and just disappear. So, the discovery of her belongings in the woods and her backpack buried a year later adds a layer of intrigue and suggests that there may have been some foul play involved, right? That's the vibe I'm getting here. Let me know if you agree and what your theories might be in the comment section below. This is story 2. My mom's friend's son has been missing since November. The kid has epilepsy, and his mom's statements about it have been very inconsistent, which is quite unsettling. It's strange because this is someone I know who has either passed away or hidden. There's just no way the kid has been surviving in the wilderness this whole time. This isn't a survival story. Another story that's heartbreaking apparently, Susan went missing, and her husband claimed he took his kids camping late at night, leaving in the middle of the night and returning the next day in the middle of winter. His wife was gone when he came back. So many things point to him being responsible. Her phone and belongings were still at home, her family didn't hear from her, and she had made it clear that if something happened to her, her husband was to blame. He had been outrageous and controlling, and there was a large wet spot on the carpet with a fan blowing on it when the police arrived. Oh, and the kids saying they knew they'd never see their mom again, that she wasn't around when they were woken up in the middle of the night and put in the front seat of the van to go camping. It's a very sad ending, where it turned out that the husband's father was involved with the crime, and the husband was never charged. He eventually moved the kids out of state and set off the house they were living in. As far as I remember, there was no closure on Susan being found, no justice, no answers. It's bewildering. Story 3. In my senior year of high school, 3 teenage girls from my area disappeared. All of the cases were unrelated and occurred within a month of each other. 2 of them have been resolved now. The first girl left a party and never made it home. It was later discovered that she was intoxicated and had driven off the road into a lake. The second was a mentally challenged girl who vanished from her home. It's suspected that her parents may have been involved, but no one has been arrested or charged, and she is still just missing. The third girl never came home one night. She had gone to a trailer park to buy a pill, but the couple there tied her up and kept her in a kennel for 2 months, subjecting her to so much cruelty. They were eventually caught when they invited a friend over and offered him the chance with her as well. He left and called the police, who then rescued her. All of these disappearances happened within a matter of weeks, and the local news was filled with theories. It was really disturbing to have such events happening in my own community. Another story involves my family in India, where we use gas cylinders for cooking and they need to be refilled every 3 weeks or so. The refill company sends cylinder trucks to remote areas. One time, my aunt missed the truck and sent my cousin, who was a teenager at the time, to the nearby town to refill it. He left on his bike and never came back. There was no evidence of him, nothing at all. The police stopped the search after a year and the family stopped after about 5 years. He just vanished that day. It's been almost 20 years now, and my aunt is still waiting for his return. In another incident, I went missing when I was young. I wandered away from our townhouse in southeastern Michigan, an area known for violence but rare abductions. There had been a string of abductions going on for a month. I was heading to the woods to play with sticks and, do silly things when I saw a man and a teenage girl asking one of my neighbor's kids, who was 3 at the time, if he wanted some free toys. He went inside and told his parents, who called the police. The couple got frustrated and went into the woods where they saw me. They didn't try to trick me, they just chased me. I hid in a tree for at least 10 hours. The police found me after the couple had been arrested. Story 4. Davina Chapman from my hometown went missing after being last seen at a bar one night. Her fiancé reported that she never came home. After days of searching, the fiancé directed the police to a specific area where her body was found. What happened was that she and her fiancé got into a fight at the bar, and he was taking her home when she started yelling and panicking in the truck due to their argument. He pulled over on a bridge and they both got out. He assaulted her, eventually throwing her off the bridge into the muddy swamp below. She survived for a while as the police found a short trail where she attempted to crawl. In another story, a man traveled overseas with friends for a vacation. He had an injury in a fight the day before they were due to fly back home, so he had to stay behind while his friends left as planned. Alone in a foreign country, he called his mother one night to express how unsafe he felt and his belief that people were after him. However, he did make it through the night, and the next day was his flight home. On the day of his flight, everything seemed normal as he arrived at the airport with all his luggage under the watchful eye of security cameras. Suddenly, he entered a room and went out of view of the cameras. Moments later, he emerged without his luggage, sprinting out the front doors with no one in pursuit. Cameras outside the building captured him running into the woods on the airport property, and he was never seen or heard from again. Okay, so this man's actions before vanishing are actually really puzzling. It makes you wonder, if there was more to the story than meets the eye, because, obviously there is, right? What were the external factors contributing to this supposed fear of his that made him run into the woods and just completely disappear forever? Story 5. One of the most chilling cases is that of Nathaniel Bar-Jonah, a convicted offender with a history of inappropriate behavior and suspected of multiple crimes. He would often impersonate police officers in attempts to deceive and attract individuals away from their homes. Despite expressing disturbing thoughts and interests to medical professionals, he was released after a judge determined that the state had not sufficiently demonstrated he was a danger to the community. Shortly after his release, a 10-year-old boy was reported missing. Witnesses observed the boy in an alleyway, apparently waiting for someone, and then being trailed by a heavy-set man fitting Bar-Jonah's description, with the boy seemingly upset. The boy was lost in that alleyway and was never seen again. During a search of Bar-Jonah's residence, authorities discovered a list of names which included individuals he had previously harmed and the missing boy, followed by an indication of their fate. Numerous newspaper articles related to the case were scattered throughout his apartment. A former housemate found articles of clothing that matched the description of what the missing boy was wearing on the day he vanished. Authorities also found a notebook containing encrypted writings. It took considerable time for law enforcement and the FBI to decipher the code, revealing Bar-Jonah's detailed accounts of engaging in acts and writing. Despite his substantial size and known large appetite, Bar-Jonah did not make any significant purchases of food for nearly a month following the boy's disappearance. In that period, he hosted several gatherings where he cooked and served food to neighbors, who commented on the unusual taste of the meat he provided. A kitchen appliance found in his apartment used for processing meat contained traces of human DNA. The authorities were unable to establish a direct link between Bar-Jonah and the missing boy, and the origin of the DNA found in the kitchen appliance remained unidentified. Story 6. A girl I graduated high school with went missing a few years ago. She was a single mom with 2 young children. One day, she put the kids on the bus and was never seen again. Her car and her purse were still at the house, I believe. Her parents continued to search for a few years, but there have been no significant developments in the case. It's unsettling to me because of our proximity, and we live quite close to each other. We even share the same name, which adds to the eeriness. Although we weren't friends, I knew who she was. We were 2 of maybe half a dozen girls in our graduating class with the same name. From what I've heard, she loved her kids and was a good mother, so it likely wasn't a voluntary disappearance. In another story, I have a vacation home in the Central Cascades in Washington state. There's a popular trail where I often ride my bikes. Years ago, an elderly woman was walking this trail to pick mushrooms. She'd been doing this for over 20 years and was very familiar with the trail. She was old and used a cane to get around, so she wasn't very mobile. She just simply vanished without a trace one day. Her car was found at the trailhead, but no one has ever found any sign of her. It's odd because she didn't have the ability to stray off the trail, and the trail doesn't run alongside any cliffs, rivers, or anything dangerous. I can't imagine what could have happened. How does an old woman disappear from a well-traveled trail that she couldn't even manage a quarter mile of? Okay, so if some of these are creeping you out and you're enjoying that creepiness, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 7. Many years ago, when I was in the Navy, I was in the lobby of the barracks when one of my shipmates got off the phone with his mom. He looked a bit shaken, so I asked him what was wrong. He told me this story. He was from a small farming town in Kansas, and a few years ago, before he joined the Navy, there had been a tragic incident in their town. A young couple and their 2 small children lived on the outskirts of the town. One day, the man didn't show up for work, and no one answered the phone. Police were sent to the house, where they discovered the mother and the 2 children had met with an end. The father was nowhere to be found and was assumed to be responsible. 6 months or so went by with no leads. Then, one day, a nearby farmer out plowing his fields found something related to the case. And then the case went cold. Fast forward to the day in the lobby. His mom called to tell him the case had been resolved. A few weeks prior, a young teenage girl in Los Angeles escaped from a group that had held her against her will since she was taken from her family as a little girl. She had been forced to participate in numerous acts across the country. Through photos, she positively identified the family in Kansas as one of the incidents she had been forced to be part of. The group's members were never apprehended. In another story, I worked as a doorman in a nice condo building in Montreal in the 1980s. Sebastian, a spoiled kid, would come down from his condo bored and make my job miserable for a couple of hours each day. He would push the button to open the garage door, ask silly questions, and brag about the things his well-off parents bought him. He was a real handful. His father was selling a vintage Rolls-Royce, and one day a man showed up expressing interest in seeing the car. The father and Sebastian went to the garage to show the car to the man, who then harmed the father and took the car. We found the father in the stairwell. The only thing left of poor Sebastian was one of his running shoes. I remember feeling guilty for not liking the boy. I cried when his mother was on the news, pleading for his return. As far as I know, he was never found. Story 8. A girl I went to school with disappeared in junior high. She had some issues and was associated with a tough crowd, so the police concluded that she had run away despite finding a puddle of liquid in her bedroom. At school, we were told she had run away and were encouraged to inform someone if we knew her whereabouts. For the first few days, no one really discussed it. Then, when we returned to school after the weekend, rumors began to circulate about a house party that had taken place. The police maintained their stance that she had run away right up until the day it was discovered on the riverbank. Suddenly, it became an investigation. The girl's mother has been vocal about her belief that the police mishandled the investigation. She believes they know who was responsible, but no one is willing to speak up, and crucial evidence was either lost or not properly collected. In another story, which is both eerie and remains unsolved, I had a college roommate whom I met a week before moving in through a posting on one of the school boards. We met each other's families and they helped us move in. We rented one side of a duplex with stairs, so the help was appreciated for moving bedroom furniture. We each had our own bedrooms and we were quite the odd couple. She had a messy room with clothes and books everywhere, while I kept things simple. About a month into our living arrangement, she started complaining about having trouble sleeping. She felt something was keeping her awake and she had a few strange marks on her back. We didn't know where they came from. She didn't have a boyfriend and we were both nerds who studied or watched movies, not participating in sports. Then one night, I came home from the library around 11 p.m. My roommate was home watching a movie. I said goodnight and went to bed. I woke up at 7 a.m. for class. As I passed her room, I noticed her door was open. I glanced in as I walked by and saw that her entire room was empty. She was gone, without a note. I called the police, but they didn't believe me when I said I had a roommate, even after showing them the checks her parents sent for rent. I tried calling her cell phone, but it was disconnected. I called her parents, and their number was also disconnected. I asked around campus, but there was no record of her. To this day, I have no idea how she managed to move all her belongings out between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. without making any noise that would wake me up. This remains the creepiest thing that has ever happened in my life. I moved out a week later. Wait, what? Her roommate's disappearance sounds like a real life ghost story, even. It's scary to think about how someone can just vanish, poof, without a trace. It's like she vanished into thin air, or in my head, someone or something took her. I don't know, man. Story 9. The bus driver who took me to school from the time I was allowed to ride the bus until I got a car in high school was known for being a bit grumpy on the outside, but was actually a very kind person. He would sometimes go beyond his designated route to drop kids off closer to their homes if they lived too far from the bus stops. As I got older, I learned that his son had disappeared around the time I started taking the bus. And years later, when I was in the middle of high school, our province experienced severe forest fires. Firefighters had to use techniques that involved digging up burnt areas to contain the fires. During this process, they discovered the body of a young man. It was the bus driver's son. He had been in the woods all that time. In another story, my aunt's cousin took their 2 children to Hong Kong Disneyland when it had just opened. Once they arrived at the theme park, the parents let the kids explore on their own and told them to meet back at a certain time. The son returned in a panic because he said he had lost his sister while waiting in line for one of the rides. Now, this sent his parents into a frenzy, and they decided to report it to the park security. A man approached him, saying he had overheard the situation and offered to look after the boy while they reported their missing daughter. In their distress, the parents agreed to this. Unfortunately, they ended up losing both their children. The husband stayed in Hong Kong for a year and a half after the incident, trying to find them, but to this day, they haven't had any luck. It really is truly heartbreaking. Story 10. I used to work for an iBank in Lubbock, Texas. This was about 13 years ago, and although I can't recall the names and can't find the details online anymore, I assure you the following events really happened. Occasionally, we would receive calls from family members seeking information about their loved ones' details. We never shared any information unless specific protocols were followed, which was a significant part of the job. Working with cadavers and people who had just lost loved ones made the job as eerie as you might imagine. One day, I received a peculiar call. A woman asked if we kept records of donated tissue. I confirmed that we did and that our records were checked and verified by the FDA annually. She then asked if we had any record of a donor named Mary Smith. I told her I couldn't provide that information unless she came to the office and provided proof of her relation to Mary Smith. She then lowered her voice and said, "If you have anything to do with this, you're going down like the rest of them." After the call, I reported the incident to my boss and the executive director. They contacted legal, and I was told to hang up if she ever called again without saying a word. My boss also hinted that legal had dealt with questions about this woman before. I was both spooked and intrigued. I searched for the woman's name online and found myself in the middle of an X-Files-like story. I don't remember every detail, but here's the gist. The woman's mother had been hospitalized and was pronounced departed. The body was sent to the funeral home, but the daughter insisted the body in the casket wasn't her mother's. Despite her protests, the body was buried. She continued to petition the city to unearth the body for testing, but her requests were denied, which only convinced her that the body wasn't her mother's. I found a detailed website she had created where she presented a mountain of evidence, some of it quite convincing actually, and outlined her theory that the hospital had switched the bodies, that her mother was still alive, and that a government entity had taken her for experiments. The website was so detailed and convincing that I couldn't dismiss her claims outright. I don't know what became of that lady or her mother. The fact that I can't find any current information leads me to think the daughter may have passed away. But I still think about that phone call sometimes. That woman accused the hospital, the funeral home, the donation firm, and us, as well as harassed the head of the willed body donor program, all because she was certain the body in the casket wasn't her mom's. Well, if any of these stories got to you and you want more of them, well, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for watching this one with me.